Right, hello everyone. So as you've heard, I'm here to talk to you about how to get started with OSGi. Just a very quick question for the room beforehand. How many people here have worked with OSGi before? So some, but most of you not, which is good because this is all about how to get started. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that maybe you'll be familiar with, or maybe you'll kind of wish you'd been familiar with when you first started. Just a little bit about me. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at a company called Paramus in London. I've been working with OSGi for 10 years now. I'm a co-chair of the IoT expert group. I do a lot of work with distributed systems and asynchronous systems. I have an OSGi book, which is starting to get a little bit old now, but it's still around. And so I'm, as I say, here to talk to you about something called OSGi enRoute. Now, to start with, what I really need to do is tell you about OSGi modularity, because it's important that we understand what this is. So OSGi is this modularity framework for Java. That's what OSGi is and what it does. We have jar files that are called bundles. So when I talk about a bundle, you know that it is just a jar file, but it's also a module. It has some private internal code, and then you can have packages that are exported from your bundle, so they're made available to other people, and you can have packages that are imported. And you can only import a package that's exported, and that's what we mean when we talk about having modules. So they're things that actually are deliberate in understanding what it is that they share between them. Now, all the metadata for this lives in the manifest. So the manifest of a jar file is something that you don't often touch if you're writing normal Java. You end up with quite a lot of information in there if you're working with OSGi, because these manifest headers define things like what the name of the bundle is, what the version of the bundle is, all of those package imports and exports that I was just talking about. And actually, since the addition of the generic requirements and capabilities to OSGi, there's a whole host of other stuff in there as well. And it is really important that this stuff is right. If you get this wrong, then things go very badly wrong very quickly. Now, something else that we talk about is OSGi Services. So services in the service registry allow for dynamic, loosely coupled interaction. So you can have a service that's consuming, a bundle that's consuming a service from provider A. Provider B can come along, and then the service goes away, and you can rewire to a different provider of that service. So services are how we keep our modules from being directly coupled to one another. Instead, you can consume this service, so it doesn't matter whether you're trying to look for provider A or provider B, you're just looking for someone who's going to give you this service that you want to use. Now, as I've mentioned, OSGi services can come and go. This happens at runtime. Services can also depend on other services. If you're using a service and it goes away, you need to stop using it immediately, which means you typically need to unregister the service you're providing. So a small change can cause quite a big cascade. And failure to do this properly also means you've got poor quality modules that don't work very well. So I'll have to admit that took more than 60 seconds. And this is one of the first problems that people talk about with OSGi. They say, there's an awful lot that I have to know and understand before I can get started. So actually, developing an OSGi bundle is writing normal Java code. Getting the manifest correct, as I've said, is hard. Do you really know every single package that you use when you write your code? I certainly don't. If you're using services, you have to listen, you have to react. You can get startup ordering problems if you don't do that right. And this sounds awful. And this is where you get a lot of people getting to with OSGi, and they give up. And they give up because they've not really been shown how to do this the easy way or the right way. They've just gone at it looking at the very first few pages of the spec and saying, okay, here's my main method, the equivalent of my main method. It's time to start typing code. So looking at the core spec is actually not a bad idea. OSGi specifications are really well written. They're things that humans can read and they can understand. But the problem is, as I've said, people stop too soon. They get as far as bundle activator and they think, great, I've got my main method, it's time for me to start writing code. They don't realize that there's this whole other thing called the compendium specification, which has far, far more stuff in it than the core spec. That's where all the useful stuff is. They also look at examples on the internet. Now, the problem with the internet is that it contains an awful lot of good information, but an awful lot of bad information as well. You can easily find examples that are just ancient and therefore now more or less irrelevant, or were just actively bad. The person didn't know what they were doing and they claimed to know what they were saying when they said, oh, start typing this into your manifest file. If you ever find an example that talks to you about writing a manifest file, you need to close that browser window immediately. Just don't. And this is why we need enRoute, right? Because this isn't OSGi. This is pain and misery. There are lots of good ways to do OSGi properly. The problem is that, as with many open source things, you've got some great ones out there, but documentation in open source is iffy at best for a lot of things. So setting these tools up is often not very easy, or people try to make it easy, but it involves a lot of new concepts. We actually do have more user-friendly specifications now. Over the course of releases 5, 6, and 7 of OSGi, we've worked really hard on trying to make things easier for people to use. You know, rather than saying, oh, we need to support this cool new technology, we spend a lot of time and effort saying, not only do we need to support the cool new technology, we need to make it easy to use that technology. So we have things like annotation-driven registration of services, consumption of services, adding requirements and capabilities to your bundle. This is stuff that you don't need to start digging around with horrible syntax anymore. You just stick an annotation on it that says what it does. So what we really need is we need a place where people can go and they can see how you can do this without having to spend 2 or 3 years learning OSGi first. We really want to be in the position where someone can go, they can spend 15, 20 minutes looking at this stuff, produce something and have at least a vague idea how it's fitting together. It's not going to teach you every single tiny piece of the specification, but it is at least going to show you how easily you can start and then learn from there. So this is where OSGi enRoute comes in. OSGi, it's out there on GitHub. You can look at it. It uses Maven. And it provides 4 things. There are example projects. There are project templates, or archetypes for those of you who are Maven users. We have some OSGi indexes containing things like the reference implementations and sets of useful Maven dependencies. And we have a website that explains what all of these things are. Now, it may sound odd to be talking about this now, but it really has taken quite a long time to get all of this stuff in one place so that people can get started. I have been asked by many people why we chose to use Maven, and it's because it is the right choice. I understand that many people hate Maven. Some people love Maven. I'm kind of in the middle. I have to use it a lot, so there are things about it I really don't like. But I do accept that it is a tool that pretty much everyone knows how to use. And what we need with enRoute is to make it easy for people to get started. The last thing we need is to tell you, oh, learn this crazy new tool that only 50 people in the world know how to use. No, we want it to be easy to get started. Even if what you learn is that you want to start using, say, the BND Tools Gradle workspace that you're going to be seeing later, at least you'll have been shown the right way to start developing your components before you get embroiled in a big tooling battle. Also, we're not about teaching people how to use tools. That's, we want to teach people how to code OSGi, not how to learn some new build tool. And we want all of the other plugins that people are used to using to be able to keep working, right? So that's why we've done that. The examples are then there to show you some of the things that are in the OSGi compendium. This includes how you do things like JAX-RS, transaction control for managing transaction life cycles using JPA and JDBC, things that people actually want to do. We also show you some useful things like the OSGi converter, bits of the OSGi specification that often get overlooked because people don't even know that they're there. Every example has an overview showing you the key points, the things that you should be looking at in the example to say, this is the new thing for this particular example. And all of the metadata in these examples is automatically managed. You do not have to touch a manifest file ever. Now, the archetypes, as I've said, it's a fancy Maven name for a project template, right? It's nothing more sophisticated than that. But they can be published to repositories and allow Maven-based tools to set up your build very quickly. We have enRoute archetypes for setting up the entire build, for adding new API modules or microservices or integration tests, basically just things to get you started quickly and to give you a Maven build setup that works. It is not the only way to configure an OSGi build, nor are we saying that you have to do it this way, but it's a useful way to get you started if you don't know exactly what you should be doing to start with. Then these indexes. Turns out one of the hardest problems people have had over the years is actually finding stuff that works in OSGi, things that have good quality metadata. So these indexes provide you a nice start in finding how you can get implementations of various specs and useful commonly used dependencies all in one place that you can just start using and get going with. It may not give you everything you need, but it's going to get you a very long way before you have to start scratching your head. We also keep an eye out and try to only choose the ones that have been done well. And then the website. It's publicly available. It's again on GitHub using GitHub pages. So if you want to make contributions to it, it's very easy to do. It's there to show you what the examples are, what they should be teaching you. And in some cases, it gives you step-by-step tutorials walking you through how you would recreate the example using things like the Maven command line or the Eclipse IDE. The other thing that we have on the website are FAQs and some background example information about the various compendium specifications. So, OSGi enRoute. I'm aware that you're supposed to have a picture every couple of slides when you're doing a presentation to stop the audience getting bored. It's been 15 slides and everyone seems to still be awake, so I think we're doing pretty well. But I figured what I should probably be doing now is getting rid of the slides and showing you how enRoute really works, because that's the way that you're gonna learn it, right? So it's time to switch to Eclipse. So what I have here is a brand new empty Eclipse workspace. And what I want is I want to create myself a new Maven project. So this is just Eclipse's Maven integration, which is going to allow me to use an archetype to set up a project. Now, currently it's a snapshot, and the reason that it's a snapshot is, come on network. Yeah, here we go. The reason it's a snapshot is that we're currently waiting on a release of the 4.1 BND tooling, which is going to give us the final R7 support for things like constructor injection in DS and that sort of thing. So right now it's only a snapshot because we're waiting on the release of one other thing, and then we can get going. But for now, what I'm going to do is take the project archetype and I'm going to create myself a project. So you can see here, this is all pretty easy. I'm not doing anything that you wouldn't do with any other Maven project. You can do this from the command line. And then we finish, and it's going to create me, in this case, because I used the project template, 3 projects. So this is a Quickstart, get yourself building, an OSGi service implementation that's exported as an application. That's what this project does. So we have the overall parent thing here. we have the application and we have the implementation. We have a nice simple POM. That's good. It's nice and big, so you should be able to see right the way to the back. And you can see one important thing is that we're using the BND Maven plugin. This is the magic thing that's going to work out the manifest for you. It's missing stuff like this, which is why people start telling you to write your own manifest file, because they're not aware that there are tools around that can do it for you, so you don't have to go through and try and work out every single thing you use. The application, on the other hand, is going to use a number of plugins. So you can see here it's also using the BND Maven plugin, but it's creating us a repository index, and it's using the exporter. And what it does with this is it actually will allow us to resolve our application and automatically export it as a runnable jar file. So enRoute is there to make it really easy to get going running a jar. Now, if I take a look at this application, I talked about resolving. So what resolving does is it works out what runtime we need to run our application. So if I hit this, you can see we've got the implementation, and it's worked out we need something called Felix SCR. So this is the declarative services runtime. This is basically the container that makes it easy to inject and consume services. So that's all well and good. I'm actually going to use the debug one because it's going to give me a command line that you can use in the IDE, and I can show you a bit more cool stuff. But if I resolve the debug version, you'll see we get a bit more stuff. The bit more stuff is mostly stuff like GoGo, which is the shell that we're going to be using. There's also the web console that provides us with a web UI to take a look at what's going on. But you'll still see we've got Felix SCR and we've got the implementation bundle. So it really is just the application we had before and some useful debug stuff. So I can get started and run. And if I ask Felix SCR to list the components that exist, you'll see here we've got one thing called component impl. And this guy is actually living over here. This is component impl. Now he's pretty boring at the minute. There's not a lot we can do with him. So instead, let's try and make him a little bit more interesting. So I can turn this into a JAX-RS resource by annotating it with this component property type. This is going to attach some service properties to my declarative services component. This is one of the things that we've done to make it easier to use this. Previously, you had to write big, long strings in the annotation headers. That's just gone. All you need to do now is say @JAX-RS resource, and that gives you a component property which sets this up as a JAX-RS resource. We also need to expose it as a service. Now, JAX-RS doesn't have a defined interface that you need to use to be a resource, so we can actually just make this a component impl, and now we're a service that could be a JAX-RS resource. So let's add a path. Respond to GET requests. Let's not be void. So this is the kind of thing you'll have seen all over, but something is going to happen when I save this. And you see, oh, something's gone wrong, and it's saying it can't resolve anymore. And it's because suddenly I have a whole load of new requirements for this bundle. This bundle is now saying I need a JAX-RS runtime, and these failures are coming from the fact that we're still running from the previous session, and we're dynamically trying to reapply this bundle. And it's telling us you're missing some stuff. So if we go back in here and hit resolve again, you'll see we've actually got a bunch more stuff than we had before, including, if I can find it, the Aries JAX-RS whiteboard. So this is the thing that's providing our JAX-RS runtime. You may have noticed I didn't have to do any work to tell it that I needed this, other than say, this is a JAX-RS resource. The rest of it is being handled by the annotations and meta-annotations from the OSGi specs to set up your bundle so that all of the dependencies are correct. And this is one of the really big, cool things that we've done to make everything easier to use. So now, if I finish this, you'll see that's magically sorted itself out. And so if I now go to the REST hello endpoint, you can see here, make that a bit bigger, we have the output of my endpoint. And you may have noticed that in this case I had to do an update and save, but if you're using BND tools, you've actually got live update of the stuff in your development environment. So this thing has been running since I started it about 6-7 minutes ago, and I did that resolve. It dynamically reapplied all the bundles it needed to, and this thing's still working. So I can do stuff like say, actually, I need to extend this. So add a path parameter. I'm assuming you guys are mostly familiar with JAX-RS. It's not hugely rocket science. Yeah, all looks good. So now you can see all of this is working. We've got a really nice live, debuggable, easy to use environment. And for once, you've been able to see an OSGi project that's been set up from scratch in approximately 10 minutes that does real stuff with specs that we actually want to use, right? I mean, I know it's still Hello World, but it's Hello World with a web container and a dynamic update model. So I think it's pretty cool. Now, I'm aware that I was supposed to have about this length of time to go through, so I could easily extend this demo. I could start trying to add in some references to services and other cool things you can do with declarative services, but I think I should probably instead be checking to see whether we've got questions about what enRoute is, what it does, how you can get involved.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. What is the relation between enRoute and Maven? So can this also be used with Gradle or only with Maven?
So the question was about using enRoute and whether it's just Maven or whether it's used with Gradle. Now, so the enRoute project is about providing a quick getting started. So it's not necessarily designed to be about here's how you do it with every single tool. It's about trying to get you in and using the relevant specs. However, the indexes that I was talking about, so produced by the OSGi enRoute project, are just generic sources of dependencies. So actually the BND tools project, which I've been using BND tools in the Eclipse IDE here, provides a Gradle workspace template that makes use of those indexes. So it provides the reference implementations, the OSGi spec APIs, it provides the common debug and utility bundles that you want to use, along with templates that look quite a lot like the archetypes here. So while enRoute itself doesn't provide Gradle, it does provide the building blocks that other open source projects like BND tools can use to build out their Gradle support in an easy way that's familiar to people.
Can you open up the URL for the website again?
Yep. enroute.osgi.org. Very easy to remember.
Thanks.
So, do you want to see some more demos from Tim currently?
Yeah,
I mean, we have a bit of more time, I guess, because...
Actually, I have another question.
Yeah.
Can OSGi be used with Spring? Because what you showed is basically an alternative. something similar what I'm doing, but different. So is it possible, or does it make sense?
So it depends what pieces of Spring that you're meaning. In terms of using Spring as an injection container, there is an OSGi standard called Blueprint that's similar, but actually if you're looking to get the most out of OSGi, you're probably better off using declarative services with the annotation support that's been added in R7. So the stuff that I was showing in here, so this JAX-RS resource annotation, this is a component property type which is part of the DS spec, the support for component property types. So this thing is defined in the OSGi specs, and you can see here that it actually is making use of being a component property type, which is how you end up with service properties being added. It has a meta annotation requirement for the JAX-RS whiteboard. So that's why when you used this annotation, your bundle picked up a requirement for the JAX-RS whiteboard. So by using declarative services and these annotations, you get an awful lot of help. If you choose to use Spring, you absolutely can do that, but you start to lose a lot of the helpful things that we've tried to do to make it easier to use OSGi.
We do have also, if people use CDI, we have CDI support coming in their next enterprise spec release, which should be coming out shortly.
I have another question. The abbreviation for SCR, what does it stand for? SCR?
It's the Service Component Runtime. So the Declarative Services Standard is the name of the standard. The actual instance of the container in the running framework is the Service Component Runtime. It's the thing that manages all of the components. So when I was down here and I typed SCR : that was saying go into the SCR commands, so ask the Service Component Runtime, in this case, to list the components. And you can see in here, it's listing, I've got this component in bundle 1, and there's one instance, and it's active.
Would it be too much to ask how I can use another service or how I can implement a service?
No, that's fine. I can show you that very easily. So if we want to create a new module, then let's call this API. There's our parent. And we'll make this an API project. And then a let's call it service impulse so it doesn't clash. And we'll make this a DS component. What's wrong with you? Why are you
An artifact ID, is that why it's upset?
It should have picked that up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's because it's decided to not properly. So this is a bug in the M2E tooling. It doesn't always correctly name the packages. And I'm imagining it's done a similar thing here. Yeah. So once I've got this stuff compiling again. What I need to do now is obviously set a dependency on, this is going to be easier if I do it here. So we need a dependency on the API project. There we go. So I now have a dependency on the API project, so I should be able to do I thought that was called example. No, it's just provider interface. Fine. So one of the benefits of declarative services being easy to use is now that we've implemented an interface, we're actually already a service. So the default is that we'll be exposed as a service if we implement any interfaces using all of the interfaces we implement. So I don't need to put that service equals up here. But what I probably do want to do is put a useful thing in here. So let's call this so I've put a method in there, which will mean that I need to put the method here. And we can do something easy like uppercase it. So this is now a component that's providing the provider interface. So in my REST service now, which is over here, I can do something easy like reference this provider. Oh, of course it would help if I added the dependency in here. So now I can import it. So that is how you inject a service in declarative services. You can use field injection, you can actually use method injection if you choose, and as of the most recent release, you can use constructor injection. So you can get injected with the service however you like. In this case, field injection is probably the easiest thing to do. And then what I can do here is I can say provider.transform this guy. So what I'm going to do now is see my SCR list. And we can see here that's been updated. What I am going to want to do is to teach my application project about this new implementation that I've added. Actually, that's probably still in the buffer. So that I can re-resolve.
You got that your API bundle too.
So the API bundle should be pulled in because it's a transitive dependency. This is where I'm going to regret how much of this I'm doing on the fly because I've been asked something that I've not prepared. But hey. So we've got our impl bundle which is not responding. Why have we not got the API project deployed? It should be in our list of. Yeah, Comparison example API.
Why is the
Yeah.
version off? The version's not right.
No, the version's correct. The version matches what I've got here. Version there at 1.0.
What's wrong with 24?
I'm just wondering why I can't see it in here. Well, that's why it wasn't saved. Thank you, BND Tools. Yeah, see, it's fine now. So now it's complaining about an unsatisfied reference. So this is because it hasn't deployed the service implementation, which it should have picked up. So if I take a look at this guy here, we can see it's providing an OSGi service, which is following the provider interface. And if I resolve, oh, I know what this is. Sorry, I have a locally built version of the templates, which has obviously been pulled from my M2, and it's because I was building a back level version to check something. So this is already in the real templates. So now, if I resolve this, there we go. That's fine. Sorry, that's my fault, again, because I've not tested this on my machine. The joys of using snapshots, right? So now, if I list, you can see we have two components. One of them is the service component here. The other is the original component that I had before. And if I go here and run this again, it's all caps. Huh, that was tougher than it should have been. Hi.
How does unregistering work now? We got this other thing injected, and what happens? Suppose my impl will dynamically disappear. What happens to my service?
So,
or to the application?
So if we look at this guy, you can see the service impl here is 25. So if I stop 25, that guy's gone away. And now, because I've not set anything else up, 404, because the REST service that we had is no longer available.
Right, so if you do your SCR list, you'll see the original component is now unsatisfied because its dependency is not met.
Yeah.
So unsatisfied means it's basically stopped.
So it means that it's unable to be activated because one of its mandatory dependencies is missing. So
Can I make this component react to something like this and have something like a fallback, or does it not be an optional dependency?
Well, you can make it optional, but if you want to react to it, you probably need to use method injection. She'll be called at the it's going away method, and then you can do something.
Yep.
Right. The alternate is if you, in this scenario, you could just have it, if you make it volatile. Shouldn't volatile just do it?
So volatile make it dynamic but not optional. So I can make it optional.
We probably want to make volatile and optional. That way you can just check if it's null in your implementation, then call it or don't call it.
So there are a variety of different ways of handling this, but you can see now it's active even though the thing's not present. So if I do,
It's going to take an MPE.
if I do that one, it will work. If I do this, then it will MPE because it's not there. Now you can make it volatile, you can handle it, there are a whole bunch of things you can do. But as BJ says, you probably want to use method injection at that point to react to it if you really wanted. One of the easier things you can actually do is to use the JAX-RS whiteboard to register a request filter, and in this case just not have to deal with the null, just throw an exception and use a request filter or an exception mapper to turn that into an error page saying, this bit of the service is currently unavailable, and maybe redirect them somewhere else. All of the things you can do with JAX-RS, but easily using services.
Will this implementation you built now, will this recreate this object instance that has the reference, or will it call the reflectively not the existing reference?
So because I'm using the static policy, it will not dynamically change my component. It won't try and set that field in a live component. It will destroy my old one and then create a new one. If I make it dynamic, which I can do...
Just put volatile on it, it'll automatically make it dynamic.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different ways to make it dynamic, but here...
Actually, it won't work because I think it has to be volatile. DS will be upset at you.
So here we've still got the one, but if I now start the guy again, and it wasn't destroyed in that time. You saw previously when it was being bounced, the container was giving me a load of output as it was saying, oh, you've registered a new resource, and that it does that every time it registers and unregisters. So now it's just a Jetty complaining about the sessions, but yeah, the service is back.
That's cool.
So, yep.
Is there like a management console for all your services that they are available and that are registered and maybe active or inactive? Or
So there are a variety of different things you can do. You've seen the command line. If I look at system. So this is the Felix web console. Make that slightly bigger. So you can see here, this is all of the bundles that are in my runtime. So you saw I was able to list them on the command line. This is a web front end that lets you introspect the framework. I can also take a look at configurations. I can take a look at the declarative services components. So this is basically the same information that I was getting out of the SCR commands. So yes, there is a web console you can use. It's given to you by default in the debug version of the application.
Does X-Ray still work?
I'm not sure about X-Ray.
Okay.
So it's not deployed by default in enRoute because it's also not available in Maven Central.
Yeah,
So
I don't know what the status is. But X-Ray was basically visual things. You could see all of them connected with lines, and you could, it's a bit more visual, but I don't know what status it is.
But yes, as I say, this is included by default when you're using the debug runner. It's not included in the production one because obviously you don't tend to want people to be able to go in and do things like change your configurations just by logging into the console, but you can very easily include it. So yes, it does exist.
I suppose this component implementation was injected because it implements the API interface.
Yes.
But you could also have another bundle that implements the same interface.
Yes.
What happened in this case?
So in that case, you will get whichever you get. However, you can, if you really want to, start trying to pick and choose using things like target filters. So if I stick over here and go over this way. So I was talking about service properties earlier. So this sets service properties on our service. What I can actually do is I can then say that I want some kind of service property foo equals bar, and that's only going to now inject me if the service has the property foo equals bar. So if I go back here now, here, it's going to null pointer because there is no service that has foo equals bar. But I can go into the component here. I don't have a convenient annotation that I've made to make foo equal bar, but
You just type one in and use it.
that's true. This is how you can do a component property type. So it's going to complain if I make it public. At interface foo string value.
Default bar.
If I make it a default, it won't put it in, will it?
Yeah, well, you have to annotate a component property type and then use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
Well, it doesn't matter what the default is. Yeah, no, well, you don't need the default because you'll annotate a component property type and then use it, the foo bar.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the best.
Right.
So this has created a component property annotation rather than doing thing in here. So I can now do at foo.
It's going to have to import it because it's local.
Oh, that's why it's complaining.
Oh, you didn't give it a value, yes.
Yeah, so that has now set foo to be bar. And as a result, it means that I should be able to do that. So that was just using service properties to allow you to pick one service or another. Those target filters you can actually set using configuration. So I don't have config admin installed in this framework right now, so I don't know what the web console will show me, but I can take a look. Yeah, no configurations. Normally this would show you a list of configurations in the runtime. I could set the configuration for my component to change that target filter, so I could make it require fizz equals buzz instead of foo equals bar, and then it would pick a different service. So you've got very good control over how things wire up, but it turns out most of the time you don't care. You know, there's either only one thing or any of them is okay. So you have control, but don't worry about it. Okay.
I suspect you can also do inject like a collection of all the available stuff.
Absolutely. So we can do here. Let's not make this quite so complicated. Actually, I probably do want it to still be dynamic because.
Yeah, I guess. No, if you make it a volatile collection, then it will be dynamic automatically.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the volatile makes it dynamic.
So volatile.
List provider interface.
Yes, I always want Java AWT list Eclipse, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. And now.
Just to get 0.
Yeah. So this is now injecting me with all of the ones available in the runtime. And again, this should keep working. Yeah. So yes, very easy to inject lists. Again, when you've got lists, you tend to be more likely to want to use method injection because it's usually the case that when each thing comes in, you want to do something with it. But again, field injection I'm showing because it's less typing more than anything else.
And do you also handle configuration this way, that you declare it somewhere and inject the values and then use the console?
So configurations can either be injected into your activate method. So you.
Or your field.
Yeah. So this is a slightly and in fact let's really go for it. So I can So let's call it so this is providing a definition of what my configuration map is supposed to look like. This is telling DS that I'm expecting there to be a fizz property in there, and that even if there isn't, the default value of that is buzz. And I can inject that into my start method. So somewhere here, yeah, you can see just there, that's injected me with config. That's going to, by default, come from the component properties that I've got defined. So I would actually, if I looked, I'd have an osgi.jaxrs.resource property, which had a value of true if I asked for it. But it's also given me the default property from this component property type. And you can use that configuration to do anything you like. The other cool thing is that actually, as BJ said, the activate method, I don't necessarily have to inject it into there. Oh, this isn't going to work because my...
I don't know if you have an up-to-date...
Yeah, so this is I've got an up-to-date BND, but I don't know that my SCR is up-to-date enough.
Yeah. Well, it might work, but I don't know.
Well,
Risky.
yeah. Who's feeling brave? So you can actually inject an activation field. So here, I'm injecting my config into there. And so now my activate method doesn't have any args, but I'm going to get it injected here. And let's see, did that?
Can't be got, no.
No, it didn't like that. It blew up in my activate method, and that will be because this null pointed because the version of SCR needs to be updated. It's one of the few. It's one of the things that's still snapshot because the R7 spec, the RIs are going to be final. What, this week? Next week?
Probably we're getting close, but yeah, I mean we're just been updating the tooling and the implementations to handle all the new features, so we're pretty much done. We just got to get some final builds and push the tooling through the Apache or the we got to finalize the tooling, publish it, and we've got to finalize the Apache implementation and get it published in Maven Central. And then once they're both in Maven Central, then that enables us to finish it route.
Yeah, and all of that is targeted to happen before the OSGi community event, which was 4 or 5 weeks time. So we're really very close. I mean, I'm using snapshots and things, but as you can see, it's working. It does stuff. Yep.
Can you react on dynamic values? So let's say one of your services is getting slow or unassigned or inactive. Can you react?
So for this, if we have a... So if I just comment that guy out for the moment. So you can see here I'm being...
You got to put it in the field or something, because you don't have any provider field anymore.
Get rid of that guy. No, so I'm not necessarily looking for... oh. Yeah, you're right. Let's... go back to something close to what we had before. That will now all compile, build, deploy. And we should have somewhere, yeah, got a provider. So that's now using method injection, and based on that you can react. That method will get called every time there's an injection. You can also have a remove method which will get called every time a service goes away. You can use that to react to what's happening in the environment. Right, I'm aware that I've now gone way over. I was told to keep demoing, right? They had the opportunity to stop me.
So thank you very much, Tim.
Yeah, no problem.
For